Hello everyone and welcome to the Make Your Own Noise podcast, empowering creatives to find their voice. Although that is the tagline for this show, I do try and make many of these episodes as universally relatable as possible, and today's topic is definitely no exception. That topic is overcoming loneliness. This episode is almost like a diary entry and a reflection from myself because it's something I've battled with at various times through my career and even had phases of it in recent times too. And just a starting point to mention here, the use of my words. I've had phases of it. Nothing is permanent, including your feelings of loneliness. I guess a few life circumstances and where I find myself compared to my close social group in recent times have made me feel like I'm on a different path and doing different things. And you know what? That's okay. Just because I'm on a different path, we all are on different paths, and my friends still love me and it doesn't make it wrong, and I still love them and care for them too. But we are always evolving and transitioning as individuals within ourselves and our life circumstances. Friends and relationships will come and go. Some will stay forever, some will return, and others you'll never see again. I think an important point is that if you're living in alignment to your core values, doing what makes you feel alive and joyous, then the right people will either stay or enter your life. So how can we be feeling so lonely when we're more connected than ever? 1 in 4 Australians between 15 and 24 currently report feeling lonely. Yet we live in a time where each of us have hundreds of followers on social media that we could connect with at any moment. I personally believe a big part of it is because of our devices and comforts. It's so easy to receive big dopamine hits and synthetic hits of connection that we do not seek out meaningful connections as often. It's so easy to stay at home watching Netflix while messaging your group chat, but we are missing the deeper connections that experiences and face-to-face conversations enable us to build. Not only that, statistics around anxiety and depression are well known for being at all-time highs, and I would say this lack of connection is playing a big part of that. That, along with us being absolutely dopamine depleted by our devices and comforts. So this episode today is about overcoming loneliness. But I think if we first find out why we may be feeling this way, it can help us move forward and past these emotions. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. She owns her own business and she articulated the exact same feelings I was having around it. And I do believe this is a very common and important issue, especially for people that work for themselves, like many of us are. And I want to premise this episode that I am happy with my life circumstances. I do love my job, my studio, my apartment, this podcast, how I spend my time, and I do have amazing friends and family. I think saying this out loud is actually saying I need to hear and quite cathartic. But even with all this, I too have had moments of loneliness through my career and in recent times, like I said. And this is irrespective of time with friends and relationships. And I do know others that have felt the same. So in today's episode, we'll discuss the 3 fundamentals to overcome loneliness. One of those fundamentals is building quality connections, where I've broken down 6 ways in which we can build those. So for a start, let's look at why loneliness is such a common feature amongst creative professionals. I think there are 2 main points. The first one is, like I've said, we often work for ourselves. We are not part of typical work teams. We run our own business and we make most of our decisions alone. We often work from home too. And for anyone listening that isn't a creative professional or works for themselves, you probably do work from home, but now it's quite more common. So for us working for ourselves as creative professionals, or really anyone listening, as we establish our careers, we often need to grind it out as we build our business. Establishing your own business, especially in the creative fields, is a lot of work, particularly in the early periods, and this can be a very isolating feeling, especially if not many of your friends or family are in a similar situation. Weekends off rarely exist, as many events or work opportunities tend to fall on them. Public holidays are much the same as well. I've had many a late weekend night packing up the studio and heading straight home to bed, and I don't want this to come across as a sob story. I chose to do that, and I've had amazing experiences and connections I've built in the studio. Working that hard has got me to where I am today, but the trade-off to that is, yes, I have missed quite a few social things, and that is the sacrifice I was willing to take. Working for yourself is a very vulnerable feeling. We don't have a big, if any, of a support network around us professionally. Our income relies solely on our ability to stay motivated and disciplined too. For people that don't work for themselves or run their own business, it is hard to relate to this feeling, and for many of us, that is our peers. So that alone can be quite a isolating feeling because they just don't understand where you're coming from. So that is the first reason creative professionals in particular are susceptible to loneliness. The second point, I believe, is that many creatives are somewhat outcast naturally. They think differently, they see the world differently, and they can be quite introspective too. I think that's what makes their art great. Back to my earlier point, though, if you are aligning to your core values and doing what makes you feel alive, you will draw the right people into your life. And I think their art over time will build this community. But maybe early on in their careers, I do believe that many creatives can be susceptible to loneliness for this reason. So with this in mind, what are the 3 fundamentals to overcome loneliness? These are the 3 things I believe can help us overcome these feelings, and these are things I am employing in my life, and I am noticing effects, and I'm hoping that continues too. So the 3 fundamentals to overcome loneliness, I believe, are self-soothing, service, and quality connections. Let's just repeat that before we dive into each one. Self-soothing, service, and quality connections. So let's go into that first one now. The first way I believe to overcome loneliness is through self-soothing. You might be asking, what is self-soothing and how in any way would this help me overcome feelings of loneliness? Self-soothing is a technique used to manage and regulate one's emotions and create a sense of calm and comfort. In this case, we're talking about the emotion of loneliness. And here is an important point. Loneliness is just that. It's an emotion. Have you ever felt lonely in a crowded room? Have you ever had moments of complete calm, abundance, and content when you're home alone? Most likely, at some point, you can answer yes to both of these things. Case in point, being lonely very rarely has anything to do with being physically alone or not. It is an emotion created within yourself by your thinking mind. Loneliness and being alone are 2 very different things. So in this context, I'm referring to learning techniques and practices we can employ when we are feeling emotions of loneliness. When we feel this way, how can we regulate our emotions and find calm and comfort? What practices can we partake in by ourselves with relative accessibility and ease? For me, it's things like journaling, laying in my hammock with a book, going for a run or walk, cooking a nice meal, or even writing these podcast episodes. All of these things are very accessible to me most of the time, and all of these things bring me a great sense of calm and often joy. So what are your things? Think about them, write them down. If you do not know them, you may now have the answer as to why you struggle spending time on your own. Build your life and routine around ways to make sure these practices can regularly happen. They will help combat feelings of loneliness even when you are physically alone. One more final point here before we move on too. We will all have many moments when we are physically alone. We must learn to be comfortable in that space. Some people have just not learned how to do it. Myself included a lot of the time, but it's something I'm working and practicing. Feelings of loneliness can often have little to do with your relationship with other people and often have much more to do with your relationship with yourself. I believe self-soothing is a key practice to help build a better relationship with yourself. The next of the 3 fundamentals to overcome loneliness is that of service. What is service? Service is providing your time, care, skills, or attention for the betterment of someone or something else. I'm the first to put my hand up here and say that this is my downfall, and I have some key things on my goals this year to really help in this area. I think the fact that I get to help people make music is a very fortunate position and somewhat an act of service, and it is. But it is also transactional because I am being paid most of the time to do it as well. So I am wary of that I may need to employ other practices too. Other practices for me maybe if I take a moment to listen to a young engineer's mix and provide feedback, or show someone around the studio, or take time to show an intern and assistant something. Those are more the small acts of service. So by providing acts of service, we're building a connection with others. We may be engaging with the community. It may give us a sense of value too. All of these things can help overcome feelings of loneliness. Marcus Aurelius suggests that we recognize ourselves as the limb of a larger body and use this realization to encompass and guide our actions. He quotes, "Since you yourself are one of the parts that serve to perfect a social system, let your every action contribute to the perfecting of social life." I love this quote so much in this viewpoint. If we can learn to view ourselves as part of a bigger system, and our role is to help perfect that system, it can help us feel more of a sense of belonging and part of a bigger picture, and it takes a bit of the ego and almost narcissistic nature of everything is about us. It takes a bit of that out of the equation too. And I think that's a really important point. Today, our drive is all about ourselves. Followers, subscribers, likes, social media engagement. Again, I'm as guilty as anyone with this. But no wonder many of us are feeling isolated and lonely when all of our drive is geared towards individual accolades. I really want to work on that this year personally. Hopefully doing these podcast episodes is one of those ways, as I obviously don't get paid to do this. But yeah, some examples of service for you guys listening could be mentoring someone else, calling a friend or relative just to check in, giving a small amount to charity, paying for someone's coffee in advance, just genuinely wishing someone a great day at a checkout. Aim to leave each room better than you found it. I challenge you to try and feel a negative emotion such as loneliness amidst doing something nice for someone else. It's impossible. As Marcus Aurelius says, what brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. And we all want to be a part of a thriving hive. So the third of the three fundamentals to return to is quality connections. This is the most obvious one of the three to help us overcome loneliness, hence why I felt the need to put it last, but also break down the most in it. If we have quality connections, we feel seen, heard, valued, respected. I probably don't need to go into too much detail on that point because at some point in our lives, most of us will have felt the joy of a true connection with someone. Whether it's family, romantic, a fantastic conversation with a friend, we know that feeling. I think it's one of the most beautiful feelings we can have. And if not the key reason, it is on par with any reason I can see that life is worth living. But how do we build quality connections? Especially as creative professionals, learning to network and build connections is vital to our longevity and success. For a start, two fantastic books I could not recommend high enough on building quality connections are How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's the first self-help book I ever read. It is an all-time classic and an absolute read, an easy read too. And the second is a book by renowned American film producer Brian Grazer. It's called Face to Face. It's basically about the art of human connection with a particular emphasis actually on eye contact too. So I have 6 points today I would like to discuss on how I believe we can build quality connections. The first point is genuine attentiveness and presence. When you're communicating and engaging with someone, genuinely listen to what they are saying. Keep your mind in that exact moment. Don't think ahead and be worried about what to say next or where to enter the conversation or what you have to do after this. It's not an easy thing to do at first, but just like any skill, it can be learned with time. Have you ever been talking to someone and you know their mind is somewhere else? I felt that, and I've probably definitely been the person on the other end doing that as well. So maintain eye contact. Really listen to the words they are saying. Again, to quote Marcus Aurelius, acquire the habit of attending carefully to what is being said by another and of entering so far as possible into the mind of the speaker. So from this point, the second point I have to help build quality connections is to focus on quality, not quantity. Would you prefer to go around at a social event and have a service level conversation with everyone at the event, or have a really nice connected conversation with a single or handful of people? Because I guarantee the former will leave you with no deep connections, while the latter could open up something great. I have to admit that is one part of this podcast I am really good at. I will sit down and have a D&M with one or a handful of people at a party instead of bouncing around. Next time you're at an event or some kind of social engagement, try not to bounce around and shake hands with every single person there and just say a nervous hi and bye. Lean into a conversation. Look for cues from the people you're interacting with. Are they asking you questions? Are they opening up and saying something personal? This brings me to my third point. Look for emotional bids. This is a phrase I heard coined a while ago, and it really stuck with me since I heard it. An emotional bid is often a small and subtle opening someone gives you that they are open to sharing something about themselves. They might say something like, yeah, I've struggled with getting back into the swing of things after the holidays, or I didn't get a great sleep last night. People drop these type of emotional bids all the time. If you can develop a key eye for them, it can really help you connect with people if you lean in and respond. So to either of those points, you could respond with something like, is it just coming back from the holidays, or did you find you were struggling before them too? Or is there anything in particular that has made it hard for you to get to sleep? You will be amazed at what leaning into these emotional bids can do for your quality connections. It makes people feel seen, which is fundamentally what we all need. So the fourth point for building quality connection with someone is also another term I heard recently. It's called reverse charm. This is about making other people feel good about themselves. We know there are people in our lives that when we spend too much time around them, we feel drained, while there are others when we leave their company, we feel elated. We want to be one of those people for our connections. This isn't about making up disingenuous compliments or remarks. This is about getting people talking about things that excite them and asking them questions about themselves that are genuinely interesting. We want to be listening and responding with genuine remarks and input, not trying to look for openings to share cool things about ourselves to try and impress them. We often try so hard to be the most charming person in the room. Why don't we spend time making other people feel like they are the most charming person in the room? We are more likely to make a good impression on people by making them feel good about themselves than trying to impress them with our own stories and achievements. The next point is a bit more specific for creatives working for themselves, and that is to find ways to collaborate with others. Again, drawing back to the point, we often do work for ourselves. Yes, we are working with bands and artists in my case, but they are hiring me for a service. So really, I'm serving them, which is great. The difference with collaboration is you both have an equal investment on a desired outcome. When I'm, with a band, for example, my outcome is for them to have a great experience. For them, it could be to make a festival lineup or Triple J rotation. If I can find ways to collaborate with other people, like when I've hosted songwriting competitions or social events, I really find it's a great way to build quality connections with people in the industry. So have a think about your specific role within the industry. What are ways you can work equally, collaboratively with someone else? So the final of the 6 points to help build quality connections is a very new concept to me. As soon as I first learned about it, my mind went back to the past and I almost shuddered with moments I'd missed this opportunity. It's all a part of learning and growth, and this is a huge focus for me moving forward. That point is learning to celebrate others' wins. So let me explain. It is easier to be a good friend, partner, family member when someone is having a tough time. It's obvious, it's somewhat expected, it's important too, but what about learning to celebrate and make a deal out of someone you care for having a win? This blew my mind to think I've never considered this. How many people do you have that you can call in a crisis? Hopefully a couple. How many would you ring up and share about a win you just had? Maybe not as many. We can feel awkward doing it. It does feel awkward, doesn't it? You want to share, but you don't want to come across as bragging or making the other person maybe feel bad about themselves, especially in Australia when we tend to suffer from tall poppy syndrome. So next time your friend has a work promotion, shout them a drink. When your friend is having a child or gets engaged, drop them off a small gift. Even just say some really encouraging words to someone, but learn to be there for someone to celebrate their wins, just like you'd be there for their losses too. So that brings us to the end of today's podcast of Overcoming Loneliness. The 3 fundamentals and 6 ways to build quality connections. So just to go over that again, the 3 fundamentals we had were self-soothing, service, and quality connections. And the 6 ways I believe that can really help us build quality connections are attentiveness and presence, the quality of our relationships, not the quantity, looking for emotional bids and leaning into them, the art of reverse charm, collaborating with others in a professional context, and to learn to celebrate others' wins, not just their losses. I really hope today's podcast has helped. This is something quite personal. Maybe I haven't lent in and opened up enough about it in this podcast, but it's something I've felt at times. And again, even amidst having awesome relationships and friends and family, it's still something I have struggled with and felt, and I know others have too. So I really hope this podcast gives you some ways to learn to build a better relationship with yourself through those self-soothing practices. I hope it might help you look for opportunities to provide service to others, which I think builds your own self-esteem and self-worth. And I really hope the end part of this podcast help you look for ways that you can build better quality connections, because I think that's obviously such an important part to overcome feelings of loneliness too. Thank you so much for listening and taking the time. Please like, follow, subscribe, message me your thoughts. I really get a lot out of the feedback, both positive and things I can work on and improve too, because I'm still learning this and new to it. Have a terrific week. I will talk to you in 2 weeks' time with a new episode, and get out there, make your own noise, and look after yourselves. Good. podcast.